What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some of the best routes that wide receivers can run versus zone coverage and versus off-man coverage. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things, but also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you guys would like a daily off-season training schedule to follow with over 500 plus wide receiver drills and gym exercises, check out that very first link in the description below for our ultimate 8-week wide receiver workout plan. It's 500 plus drills and exercises, like we said, with sets, reps, and examples of each one all broken down for you. So check out that very first link in the description below. If you guys would like some more information on that, let's get started. So now, first things first here, how do you identify the difference between off-man and zone? That's the first thing I want to talk about before we get into these routes, because honestly, it's quite simple, the routes that you are going to work against these coverages, but how do you identify it? And this first example is obviously what? This is zone. So if you see a DB who's lined up and his eyes are to the inside, he's lined up a little bit outside shade, he's about 7 to 8 yards off, you could pretty much determine that that's a zone coverage look on the outside. Now, can he disguise this coverage? Absolutely. Can he show like he's doing press and then bail into zone coverage? Absolutely. Those are all things that DBs can do, and DBs are very, very crafty individuals. But usually when you see this type of coverage coming off the line, that is zone. So the first thing I want to talk about is an inside breaking route versus zone coverage. So let's play this full speed and let's watch what Burks does here on this route. So he comes off the ball and he attacks something on this DB called the blind spot. You see how much separation that gets him on this post route when he makes this cut. He is wide open. That ball should have gone to him. They throw this out route, but they sail this out route, but Burks is open because of how he angled his route. So a post, a dig, I would say even a curl. How you would run this against zone is by attacking this DB's blind spot. So we have to be able to understand his responsibility. So every time you come up to the line as a wide receiver, you want to identify a pre-snap process. Now that goes for the same thing with press, zone, off man. You have to identify these three specific things on a DB. First one is his leverage, right? So we see that he's lined up and he's shaded a little bit to the outside of the wide receiver. So that automatically tells us he's trying to take away the outside routes, like an out, like a comeback, like a fade, and that he probably has some kind of help to the inside that he's trying to force us to. Automatically, we know by his leverage, that's what that tells us. Regardless if it's off man and regardless if it's zone, because honestly, you would run the route the exact same way, whether it's off man or whether it's zone. And we're going to get into some different examples in a second here. So he's outside leverage. We know that. Number two, we want to identify distance, right? So he's about, I would say, 6 to 7 yards away from me. Okay, that's a good amount of distance. It's not press coverage. I don't have to worry about a release. I just got to get up into my route. And then last but not least, you want to discuss the cut, or you want to identify the coverage, right? So if I see his eyes to the inside, identifying the number two, looking at the quarterback, that tells me that it's zone. If he's in a more squared up stance looking at me, similar to like, you see how this safety's lined up? Like if that was what the corner was doing, facing us, eyes keyed in on my hips, I might consider that an off-man coverage look, okay? But honestly, you guys would run the route the exact same way. It's more so based about his leverage and about the distance. So if you have to run a post, a lot of guys will see this outside shade zone coverage look and they'll just go run the post. But you're running right into his safety help. That's exactly what he wants you to do. Where does he not want you to beat him? He doesn't want you to beat him outside, so that's where we have to threaten him. So when this DB's in this zone coverage where he turns, he's got an area behind him called the blind spot. So if you can angle your stem to the blind spot like Burks does, that's literally why they call it the blind spot. This DB cannot see you. He is going off of feel. So if you attack that blind spot with some speed, running in full stride, you can get that DB to commit, think that it's going to be a fade, and that gives you a bigger throwing window over the middle. You're not just running straight into the safety and covering yourself. You are giving that quarterback a window. And that is at the end of the day what matters against zone. Because zone, you have to get up into the route. You have to get up into the route fast, but you have to run a quarterback-friendly route. So he's running a post here, but this would be the same thing for a dig. You would attack the blind spot and then flatten it off on the dig. This would be the same thing I would say for like a curl route. You would attack the blind spot, then you break this thing off on a curl. You just have to make sure that you're letting this DB think you're running a fade and you're just trying to run right around him, because that is not where he wants to get beat deep. If this is like cover 3 or cover 4, his responsibility is the deep third. the deep fourth. So let's threaten him to that deep third and deep fourth because that will get me separation over the middle. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Well, then how would I run an outside breaking route like an out route, like a comeback, like a fade? And that's what we're going to talk about for the remainder of this video. So let's play this full speed. So this wide receiver comes off the ball. Great job attacking blind spot, get that DB to move, and then creating a bigger window. So now, let's look at this next look here. So this DB looks like he's playing outside leverage, obviously pre-snap. Remember, we want to have a pre-snap process. This wide receiver is running a fade route. So outside leverage a little bit. Eyes look like he's to the inside. He's kind of in this stance facing the inside. So this looks a little bit like outside shade, zone coverage. DB's about, again, 7 to 8 yards away from us. So I know I got to get up into my route and I have to run a fade route. What should we not do? We shouldn't just try to just take off and go run to the outside. Because remember, DB's responsibility in outside leverage is do not give up the fade, do not give up the out, the comeback, anything outside breaking. So where do you think you want to threaten him? You probably want to threaten his inside shoulder and inside hip, try to get him to crash down so you could slip back to the outside and have room. So this is a time where you wouldn't want to attack his leverage. A good rule of thumb for how you structure your routes is if the route is to the leverage of the DB and he's an off man or zone, you want to attack his opposite shoulder, right? So by opposite shoulder, I mean in this case his inside shoulder or his inside hip. If the route is to the leverage. If the route is away from the leverage, remember he's outside leverage, so that means post, digs, curls, you would want to attack his leverage because that's going to get him to widen and that'll give you more space to the inside. So that's kind of the rule of thumb versus zone and off man. Route to the leverage, attack his shoulder. Route away from the leverage, attack his leverage. So let's play this full speed. Let's watch what this wide receiver does because he does this move called a vertical set. So a vertical set is pretty much a move that sets you back up vertical. It gets you space over the top. Because again, this DB, remember, he's outside shade. So we're trying to get him to think we're running a post. We throw this hard cut to the inside. That's what a vertical set is. A vertical set is where you step with your inside foot, you sell with your hips, you sell with your shoulders, make this DB think you're running a post. Because if he doesn't have any other threats, like if you're not running a post and there's not like a wheel to the outside, that DB's probably not just going to stay home. He's probably going to crash on the post. He's got no other threats. He's not an idiot. He's not just going to stay right there at 8 yards and just, oh, he's going inside, I'm not going to move. If he doesn't have any threats, he's going to probably try to trail you and make a play. So that's what we are trying to sell. But meanwhile, even if we get this DB to just hesitate for a step, that gives me more space to the outside. Even if you're faster than this DB and you just try to run around him, guys, you will get squeezed to the sideline. And that is a very, very tough throw for the quarterback. Even if you're open and that DB's trailing you even by a little bit, that's a tough throw. It's called a fade route for a reason because a quarterback needs space to fade you with this ball over your outside shoulder and outside hip. So this is textbook. This is exactly how you would run a fade route versus outside shade off man or outside shade zone coverage. That's exactly how you would do it in either situation. Like, let's go to the first example. That's how you would run a fade. You would go at him, give a hard fake inside, hoping he crashes so you have space and you try to stay as tight as you can so the quarterback can fade us. We would like to stay anywhere between the middle, or let's say this, the quarterback is dropping the ball between the numbers and the sideline, so I don't want to just run around and run straight to the sideline. Let's give him room. That's exactly how you would run it versus either coverage look. So I'm going to play this one full speed one more time. Great example of a vertical set and a great example of giving the quarterback room to fade us. Okay, so now remember what I said. I wanted to show this example because, like we said, rule of thumb versus off man or zone coverage is if you have a route to the leverage, you want to do what? You want to attack a shoulder. If you have a route away from the leverage, you want to attack the leverage. So this DB's inside shade, remember, we want to identify three things. Shade or leverage, let's put it that way. You want to identify leverage, distance, coverage. So leverage, inside, obviously. Distance, he's probably about 7 to 8 yards off. Coverage, his eyes are on me, squared up stance, that tells you that it's off man. So he's running a post route here. So how should he run a post route? He should attack his shoulder and hip, his outside shoulder and his outside hip, right? Because if he was running like a 10-yard out, what do you think he would do? He would stem him. He would angle his stem to this DB, attack his midline, attack his leverage, so this DB keeps his leverage, giving us more space to the outside. Same thing if you had to run a fade. You would run right at this DB to give you space to the outside. But when we have to run a route to the leverage, dig, post, curl. Let's attack a shoulder. So let's watch what this wide receiver does. He comes off the ball, gives a little tempo change, accelerates, and we get that DB to open up his hips. Now, why do you want to do this? Like, it's a post route. That's a pretty uncomfortable break what he does at the top. It's because it's going to screw up spacing and timing if you force the route. A lot of wide receivers, when they have to run this post route, they will stem to the inside and try to just hope that this DB backpedals and they just cut in front of him. But if this DB is disciplined, he is going to keep his leverage. Guys, you go attack this DB's leverage, he's going to keep that leverage. That's his responsibility. Don't give up the post or the dig. So then, when you stem him to the inside and he weaves and keeps it, you're either going to end up breaking right into him, which is not good because he'll get hands, disrupt timing, and you won't be open. Number two, you might keep stemming, and then you end up running a post and you're all the way over the middle of the field, which in a real game, that is not realistic spacing. So you have to attack the outside shoulder and hip to get that correct spacing. If we can get him to commit his hips and I slip underneath, that's no different than me running the route with the DB in outside shade. I have plenty of spacing and I'm where I need to be for my quarterback. But when you burst at that outside shoulder, you better self-fade. So you see how this wide receiver gives this little hezzy move? That's just to kind of slow the tempo, and then he accelerates to the outside. You got to run with speed, you got to run with good stride, and you got to have good body language. Everything that sells the vertical, because that's what will get that DB to flip his hips. Because DBs are taught not to flip their hips, so you have to make sure that we sell. So this next example, fellas, I just want to show because I want to showcase how DBs are crafty and how they will try to change up what they do. Because, you know, like if a DB is listening to this, trying to understand how wide receivers think, how wide receivers work their routes, that is very, very smart. Because you know what a DB is going to do is he's going to line up inside shade on a play, and then he's going to jump to the outside shade as soon as the ball is snapped. Right? Like they will mess with you guys. DBs are very crafty because they have to be. They play a very, very hard position on the field. So as a wide receiver, we go over all this, how to run certain routes versus certain coverages versus certain looks. So you guys are prepared. Because I want you guys to be prepared and have a plan off the line, and I want that plan to be automated. I don't want you to sit there for 20 minutes having to think about what you're doing. I want you to just go, right? And it takes reps to be able to do that. But we also have to be able to react as a wide receiver. Playing wide receiver is just as much about having a plan as it is reacting. So let's watch what this DB does. So he's running a corner route. So inside shade, you got to run a corner route. Remember, that route's away from the leverage. What should you do? You should stem him to the inside, get him to keep his leverage, and then you have plenty of space to run your corner. But on the snap, this DB disguises his leverage, and he goes outside shade. But this wide receiver does a great job reacting and just attacks the inside shoulder, right? We see he's lined up inside shade. Now he jumps to the outside. So you're angling your stem. You see that he jumps to the outside. All right, let's just keep going. Let's sell vertical at his shoulder, vertical at his hip. Hope that he opens up his hips. Maybe I could give like a rocker step if he's sitting right at the break. But you attack that shoulder now. The route changes mid-stem because that DB disguised what he was doing. So you just have to make sure that you have a plan, fellas. That DB could come down and show press and bail. He could be inside shade, jump outside shade. You just have to show that you just have to have a plan, and you have to be able to react when that plan doesn't go as well as you might have hoped, okay? So just know that, fellas, you got to react, and you also need a plan. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like an 8-week wide receiver workout plan in the gym and on the field, everything you should be doing for 8 weeks, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to get you on that. I'll see you guys next time.